In my home, Hong Kong, academic grades define success. Unfortunately, this quest for success has cost the lives of 65 young people. Without noticeable signs of depression, they committed suicide due to academic and parental pressures. As a student myself in Hong Kong, I feel lucky to have survived the brutal education system without any major problem. I seem okay. Well, now I'd like us all to visualize an image where we exist on a spectrum from mental illness to mental well-being. I would like to be bold and suggest that we're not existing in either side. Instead, we're perhaps closer to the middle than we may like to admit. So how can we solve the problems among our young minds and protect the youth of today? I believe SPF is the key. Now we all know SPF as a substance that protects us from the sun. Likewise, schools, peers, and families, these three factors can combine into a protective force of support and positivity. In schools, educators need to be aware to deal with dysfunctional behavior in a compassionate manner. A role model school would be Robert W. Coleman Elementary School in Baltimore, where detention is replaced by meditation. When students cause disruption, they are sent to the mindful moments room, where they are encouraged to breathe, reflect, and recenter. On the contrary, my experience of negative reinforcement had definitely did more harm than good. In my school days, I had a lot of fear and insecurities about my school performance. And even now, I'm worrying whether you like my speech or not. Ladies and gentlemen, it is time to break the cycle of pressures generated by governments, principals, and teachers. Now, second, onto peers. Bullying is pushing normal kids worldwide to their limits. It was once believed that steak and stones can break our bones, but names will never hurt us. This is not true. Words and names can and do hurt us. What's worse, these words aren't only spoken in the playground nowadays, but also online. I speak to my fellow peers here. We have to take responsibilities for our language, both spoken and worldwide and written. And now, the third F stands for family, where young people is harmed by breakdown in communication. There is a Chinese saying, 打者愛也, which means when you hit your child, you are expressing your love. Now, well, this is simply not true. Needless to say. Well, if you have experienced this, you won't be able to laugh, I believe. Now, all right. So before I end my speech, I would like to tell you all a story about a child who was beaten with a feather duster whenever obedience was not observed. He would cry, wipe away the tears, and feel shame for the problem he's caused. And he now stands before you, asking you to play your part in improving the lives and minds of young people. Ladies and gentlemen, we cannot bring back the 65 young lives lost, but we can and must hear these powerful testimonies. We have to join hands with the SPF, school, peers, and families, and we have to create an environment where all young people can thrive and be the best versions of themselves. So ladies and gentlemen, before it's too late. Save young minds.
First of all, thank you very much for your speech. It's very insightful. In your speech, you mentioned how academic and parental pressures were factors in what led these youngsters, I guess, taking their own lives. Relating your speech back to the concept of war, would you describe relationships with parents and relationships with teachers as a state of warfare in Hong Kong right now?
Okay, so like from my personal experience growing up, I do believe that to a certain extent, there is a state of warfare existing in schools, like between youngsters with their teachers and parents. Like I am actually teaching as a part-time English teacher in a secondary school, and it is quite astonishing to me that the other day I saw a teacher who was like literally like when the student is only this tall, and he was like this, like scolding him. So I believe this kind of using the authority to suppress young minds, and even like whatever the child has, whatever mistake the child has made, it is never okay to impose themselves as authoritative figures like that. So I do believe there is a state of war there. And now back to parents. Well, I mean, families are definitely the one powerful constant during everyone's lives. But there have been cases where I heard my classmates in particular, where he didn't perform really well in a mathematics assessment, and he literally got a chair thrown at him at home. So, however extreme it may sound, these cases do happen in not only in Hong Kong, but I believe in the greater Asian region. And this is a problem, as my speech says. We have to face them and we have to solve them. And it is not a correct way of educating youngsters. And instead, I believe that we should teach our youngsters with love. We could never spoil our kids with love.
Great speech. I have a question about how there's disguised love and disguised hatred. So when you're getting oppression from your parents, you get overwhelming love, but it gets disguised as oppression in this form due to the flawed education system. Mm-hmm. So do you believe that parents are the flaw? Because not every parent does realize due to traditionalist values. So how would you think to weed out the problem in this scenario? Because you get lost in the compassion instead of seeing the real problem.
All right, so thank you for your question. Well, your mention of disguised love, I believe, refers to when we pamper or spoil our kids too much, that we begin, like parents, allow them to do whatever they want. But I believe that love is never something that we could spoil our kids with. Like compassion, of course, is an important factor in which we should instill like positive reinforcement in our kids. But then parents and teachers need to be aware that these kind of positive reinforcement couldn't go too much, like go too far away. Like when a kid really does make a mistake, then simply point it out.
Yeah. How do you think that teachers and parents cannot put pressure on their kids, but also ensure academic success for them?
Okay, so I believe that when we all grow up, we've been told or taught that pressures could act positively or negatively on us. Well, in the most ideal situation, pressure should be the kind of nerve, for example, when I was sitting there just now, the kind of stress that pushes us to do our best. And to able to achieve this optimum amount of pressure, I believe that, firstly, exams should be reduced to a reasonable amount, and a second chance can always be given. It should always be given, and it's not like I heard that some days ago in China, the graduation exam could only be taken once, and that kind of pressure does drag many students down. So I believe that we should all be given a second chance, and so that the pressure would not be too huge that we couldn't handle. And yeah, and I believe this is the kind of pressure that would push us forward, but not cause to depression problems.
Great, thank you.